Blessings, beloveds. Welcome back. Anastasia, Cosmic Astrologer with you guys, wanting to talk about the sextile aspect between transiting Saturn and transiting Neptune. So I'm just going to bring up the chart. This is actually just the chart for today. And this chart shows us the position of, well, where everything is, but what we are really focusing on today is Neptune, which just happens to be in the 7th house of this chart. At 18 degrees 42 minutes of Pisces and retrograde. It went retrograde a few days ago, and Saturn at 17 degrees 59 minutes of Capricorn, which is also retrograde and hanging about the Pluto and South Node in Capricorn as well. Now, before I make I'm going to try and make this audio presentation not too long, and I'm just going to, first of all, make a few points that are very, very important to consider when you are thinking about this transiting aspect happening in the heavens all of this year. First of all, let me just give you the dates of this transit. So it started earlier this year in March. 13th of March was the first approach of this aspect. And 19th of June was the second hit. So that was 10 days ago. And then the final hit will be on the 8th of December 2019. And for those of you that are not familiar with what it means to look at the exact dates of a transit throughout a year or 18 months or 2 years, or however long it's going to be, even though we are having this particular transit, this sextile between Neptune and Saturn all year, the months that I just told you guys are the really important months where the energy is actually a lot more potent and things can really come to light and basically manifest more so during those particular months, March, June and December. And that is the case with any transit, really. There's always going to be, it's think about it like this. It's two bodies coming together through whatever aspect that's described by, and they are going to have this interaction for 12 months, 18 months, whatever it may be. So the first point of contact, which is the beginning of that transit, is literally the beginning of those two energies merging together in whatever way that's going to be. So a story begins at that first hit, and then the second hit is, you could say, the middle part of that entire transit. So things hit in the first date, first month that two planets are aligned together, and time goes forward, a few months later, they're still in aspect together, but they, through planets going retrograde and direct, obviously this is what creates these hits that take place. So that the middle point, which is the second hit, is an area where things have been created and built up and manifested relating to the archetypes and planetary energies and aspect in question. And then the final hit, which is in this case going to be in December towards the end of this year, will be the closure of what this aspect actually brought for us. Okay, so that's just a little bit about understanding how aspects work on that level. So that's the first thing. The other thing that I think is very, very important to explore and consider is there's a few things. First thing is, have a look at what Saturn and Neptune are doing to each other in your own chart. Do they have an aspect in your own natal birth chart? What is the aspect that is there between them? And if they don't have an aspect, that's okay. It's still important. But see, these two planetary forces, they are very interesting energies from the point of view of they appear to be completely different from one another. And indeed, they actually are. But then on another level, they're actually very, very similar as well, which kind of sounds weird. But let me just unpack that for you a little bit. So Saturn rules your reality, the reality that you perceive, essentially, the reality that you structure and create throughout your entire life. So Saturn rules the matter of your life, literally the material world, the matter, everything that is created on this material plane is created and experienced and manifested through Saturn's vibration, right? It's the practical levels of life where we implement responsibility and duty and action on those practical, methodical levels and discipline, where we basically structure and create our life. So obviously very, very important. So Saturn is matter, literally, but it's actually, in another way, it's actually spiritualized energy coming through into this material matter, this material reality, because Saturn does have a vibration of high spiritual essence, especially when you understand Saturn esoterically. And even from ancient medieval astrology, Saturn was associated with magicians. So Saturn is not just the archetype of restriction, limitation, suffering, separation. It is all those things, but it is much more. But when Saturn is manifesting on this material plane is so dense. It's a dense plane that we live in. It's you can't penetrate through it like you could with Neptune, for instance, right? Neptune penetrates beyond everything, non-material. But any creation that even comes from the spiritual dimensions has to come through the bounds and the realms of Saturn in order to be manifested here on this physical plane. So that's what Saturn reflects, amongst many other things as well. And Neptune reflects spirit, literally spirit, divine, source, oneness, spirituality, truth in the ultimate sense. So you're looking at two planetary energies that appear to be reflecting completely different realities. And as I said, on the one hand they are, but on the other hand they're not, as they are experienced here on this earth plane and reflected through matter, they both come from different levels, but they both hold a spiritual vibration, just in very different ways. But on a psychological level, when you're talking about Saturn and Neptune, it's the apparent split between spirit and matter, and the ability to synthesize and integrate those two parts of your life as functioning properly and in a healthy way. And the aspect between them in your chart natally will speak to this matter of life for you, in that how do you deal with your spiritual self, your spiritual life, and your version of reality, whatever that may be. How do you bring those two parts of yourself and parts of your experiences into this existence? Is there a inherent conflict between them? And there usually is for a lot of people. And that is often reflected through hard aspects in the natal chart. So if you have a Saturn conjunct Neptune, or a Saturn square Neptune, or a Saturn opposite Neptune, you will encounter these two archetypes, these two levels of experience and existence in some kind of difficult way. And that could just be seen through swinging between one and the other, or just having a headbutting session between both of them, polarizing one and being the other. You see, so there's a lot of different manifestations that can come through depending on the aspect between them. But essentially, if it's a hard aspect, it's the inherent challenge and conflict and difficulty to synthesize and integrate the world of spirit and matter in this particular reality as we understand it and know it for ourselves. So that's the first thing you need to consider when you listen to what I have to say about Saturn sextiling Neptune. If you don't have an aspect between them, then, as I said earlier, it doesn't matter. I don't actually have technically I don't have an aspect between them, but if I was to extend the orb, then I would actually have an opposition between them. But I do feel it sometimes, I must say, but it's not a dominating sort of theme or feature in my chart as much as other things are. So have a look at what they are doing in your natal chart, because Saturn and Neptune forming a sextile just basically enables you to synthesize, integrate, and work with in a harmonious way, and in a way where opportunities can come to you, where you can bring your material gain in alignment with your spiritual pursuits, so that the world of spirit and the world of matter suddenly seem as though they are fused and working together, you see. And this is what this sextile between Saturn and Neptune is providing us an opportunity with of 2019 to integrate and synthesize these two planetary bodies in our life of our spiritual dimension and our material dimension. Because, as I said, it is frequent an area of difficulty for many people. And just a simple example is people can swing between being overly materialistic, trying to secure themselves and their life with, as much as material gain as they can, and working very much on those external levels in order to build and create and so forth, at the cost of the spiritual dimension and spiritual life. And then the opposite to that would be being so immersed in one's spiritual dimensions and life that they've just lost touch with form and matter in the reality that exists for them in this current reality on this earth plane. So whether you are extremely materialistic or extremely spiritual, there still needs to be a balance between these two bodies. That's why they are there in your birth chart. That's why those planets exist. They are part of our consciousness, part of our makeup, part of our psychological makeup, part of our soul's makeup and expression, part of what we need to learn, evolve through, and part of what enables us to manifest as well. So it's not about rejecting one and accepting the other. It's really about synthesizing and integrating these two planetary energies. And the sextile aspect is really that perfect opportunity to find some pathway this year especially that enables you to actually integrate and bring those two forces together. So that, see, the other thing about Neptune is Neptune is so vast in terms of what it reflects, but the Neptune archetype can be the person who sacrifices too much, right? It can be the person who takes on the martyr victim sort of roles, if you like. And a person who's heavily hit by Neptune can fall into those traps, into those paths where they're just constantly trying to rescue everyone and everything around them, right? Which makes them the martyr, essentially. So that's not the healthiest path to embark on either, because that really comes back to having no boundaries. And I would say that there are some self-worth issues there as well. It's very complex, and if one is doing the Saturn thing, to have a simple word there, if one is really sort of over-identified with Saturn, perhaps is a better way to put it, then, one is busy climbing the social ladder, busy trying to get recognition and establish themselves out there in the world. Nothing wrong with any of these things, by the way. But if one is at the cost of the other, then clearly there's an imbalance. And as I mentioned before, if you have a Saturn-Neptune aspect natally that is either a conjunction, square, or opposition, then these issues are going to be very strong for you. It's also a reflection, natal aspects, conjunction, square, or opposition, if you have it, of swinging between being totally lost in fantasy land, dreams, ideals, and then suddenly being hit very hard by the harsh reality of what actually is. So people can swing between these two different experiences of reality. That can be very, very difficult because Saturn connects to depression and Neptune connects to anxiety. Now, Saturn can also connect to anxiety and depression, and so can Neptune connect to anxiety and depression as well. But generally, it would be Saturn that brings about the experience of depression, and Neptune that brings about the experience of anxiety. Now, the anxiety that I'm referring to with regards to Neptune is what you could call free-floating anxiety. And what do I mean by that? What I mean is that because it's a Neptune experience of anxiety, it's very hard to pinpoint. It's not a dense material kind of experience. It's a very inner sort of feeling of anxiety about life, about your life. And what makes it more complex is it's very, very difficult to pinpoint because it's Neptune, and Neptune dissolves things. It doesn't bind things together. Whereas Saturn binds things together, and it rules concrete, and it rules this concrete reality, and it rules denseness and matter. So when you have anxiety around Saturn issues, the anxiety that comes up can be pinpointed because it's always associated with security, not having enough money, not having a job, not being respected in your employment place or community or whatever the case may be. So it's sort of experiences in the material that you can actually pinpoint that would describe the anxiety of Saturn. But with Neptune, it can come through in your dreams, in just moments where you're sitting there alone and you may be reflecting or you may be worrying about something. It's a deep inner feeling, and it's very, very difficult to frame it, put language around it. That's why I call it free-floating anxiety. So these two planets, when they are operating on a level that brings up a lot of unconscious, unresolved matter, things that we are really struggling with internally that we either haven't come to terms with or we are not conscious of, or in denial of, then experiences of depression and anxiety can come through these two planetary energies, particularly when you have them in hard aspect natally. Why am I telling you all this? I'm telling you all this because looking at this transiting aspect between Neptune and Saturn in the heavens at the moment, yes, it's a sextile, which is a soft aspect, okay? It's very similar to a trine aspect, and it has very similar characteristics and qualities of a trine aspect. It's just 60 degrees as opposed to 120, so it's a half of a trine, right? And this sextile aspect between Neptune and Saturn will be extremely highlighted for those that perhaps have an inherently difficult aspect in their chart natally between Saturn and Neptune. This can be a wonderful year for breaking through some of these polarized energies or experiences or anxieties or fears, or just being over-identified with one or the other and struggling to get a balance between those two areas of your life. This can be a really powerful year to be able to do that. So it's spiritual wisdom, which can bring patience and self-discipline. The sacrifice that may be done in a short-term sort of period with this Neptune sextile Saturn is not a sacrifice where you sacrifice everything for another or for the world, but it's a more balanced, integrated level of sacrifice that actually has meaning and purpose and is not robbing you, as it were, but it's actually fulfilling and giving you what you need as well. So it's making short-term sacrifices to be able to bring about the material aspects of what you're trying to build in your life. And just understanding that the world of spirit and matter, whilst they appear separate and coming from different directions, they're one and the same. Okay, but there's this experience of division or separation because of how dense this particular reality is that we live in. And when you have this aspect natally in your chart, this dilemma is very strong in your consciousness, and coming to terms with it and learning how to work with it in a healthy and functioning way can be very, very challenging, because you can swing between both realities, as I said. Now, one of my favorite quotes by Rob Hand is a quote about Neptune and Saturn, which I absolutely love because it just nails the essence of these two planetary bodies. And the quote is this. You have to listen to this carefully to really kind of get it. So Saturn is the illusion that there is only one reality, and Neptune is the reality that there are many. Now, you need to really consider that statement because you see, the word illusion is normally associated with the planet Neptune, not Saturn. And in this particular statement, what Rob has done is using the word illusion, correlating it to Saturn, which is a weird thing to do, but it makes 100% sense. And it's a fabulous statement. And it basically reflects that when we are very Saturnian and we are over-identified with the Saturn reality, we are limited because we experience life just through one lens, right? We experience life through limitations, right? That there is only this existence and nothing else. And we also experience a sense of separation or isolation, aloneness. Those sorts of things come up very strongly with Saturn transits, which force us to go very deeply into our own psyche, our own self, and basically check out what is going on there. And Neptune, in terms of this statement, what he's saying is that Neptune really is the true reality that there are many realities, because indeed there are. So this is what this energy brings up. But because we are experiencing it in a sextile format throughout 2019, we are all really given the opportunity. We're granted a real blessing from the gods, from the cosmos, from divine essence, oneness. We are really blessed this year on this level to really find practical ways in working with our Saturn world and our Neptune world, and actually get them working together harmoniously, where we can have a level of inner soul sustenance and outer security from how we structure our world. You know, to have those two levels harmoniously synthesized and helping each other out is wonderful for our own consciousness and for our psyche as well, because it gives us a level of balance and harmony within ourselves in relation to these two different streams of life. As I said, they appear to be totally different, but in essence, they're not. So the other thing, and that's basically it in short, to be quite honest with you. So it's really about checking out as well where these transits are happening in relation to your own birth chart. So where is transiting Saturn in your chart? Where is transiting Neptune in your chart? In other words, where is Pisces in your chart? And where is Capricorn in your chart? Those two houses, those two areas of life are going to reflect at what level, in what grounds, in what area of life is this sextile aspect really mirroring and reflecting these aspects of life for you, your spiritual life and your life of matter structure, right? And the opportunity to synthesize these two areas of life together. The other thing that's really important as well is that people who have planets at 18 degrees of Pisces or 18 degrees of Capricorn, then this particular transit is going to be very significant, more so than for other people who don't have anything at these particular degrees of the zodiac, right? Because this sextile between Saturn and Neptune, if you have, your sun at 17 degrees of Capricorn, or your sun at 18 degrees of Pisces, then this sextile between Saturn and Neptune is playing into that planet, the sun being your central core purpose, identity, actualization, purpose in life, right? And wherever the sun is located in, whichever part of your chart, then so this aspect is going to play into that. So you need to look at what houses is this transit impacting? Are there any planets in those houses? And does Saturn or Neptune form an aspect to any of these planets as well? And I said 17 degrees of Capricorn and 18 degrees of Pisces, but it can actually be 18 degrees of Virgo and 17 degrees of Cancer as well, which is just the opposition, okay? And we can throw in a square as well if you like. But you can synthesize these sorts of details together and actually get a more detailed understanding and story of how this particular transit will actually influence you personally, and what areas of life is it highlighting for you. But overall, this transit is beautiful. It's a beautiful energy, and as I said, it's a real blessing from the gods to give us this opportunity to really integrate and synthesize the world of spirit and matter so that it's working in a healthy, functional way, and that we are getting the best of both worlds, essentially. And it's an internal state of understanding and awareness and consciousness, but that internal sort of knowing and synthesis is very important because it gets projected out there, and it's how we manifest what we manifest in our life, right? So a very beautiful transit. I encourage you all to make the most of it, and by considering what I've suggested, and perhaps if you haven't already done this, just to sit down and think about, okay, well, what houses are these planets in? And let me relate that to my life in terms of spirit and matter. And am I out of sync or out of touch with one or the other? Am I over-identifying with one or the other? And how can I now actually bring more harmony and balance? The other thing with sextile aspects, don't forget, is that they always produce some kind of opportunity, right? And now, opportunities can come through many different sources and forces, but when it comes to earth and water, which is where Neptune and Saturn are, earth and water can symbolize the opportunity coming from within your own self, actually. Whereas air and fire is usually more connected to opportunities coming to you from external sort of forces, taking action externally, meeting, other people, connecting in different ways. But earth and water are very much inner sort of functions, if you like, even though Capricorn's an external cardinal, sign of initiation. So there is that we need to bring into it too. But I guess I'm just saying, don't overlook the importance of an opportunity rising from within your own consciousness about the synthesis and integration of these two cosmic forces that are giving all of us a tremendous opportunity in amongst everything else that we're working with or dealing with, of course. But I think these two areas of life, I find them to be very, very crucial because certainly most of the people that I interact with and engage with, whether that's personally or professionally, have some level or consciousness of spirit, are interested in spirit. spirituality, understanding those dimensions for their own self. So, and I've frequently come across a lot of people who are in conflict within themselves internally, with one or the other. So another basic example would be if you're a highly sexually charged person who really enjoys the sensual sexual pleasures of life, and you are, very active on that level, and you pursue that, then there can be the experience of feeling guilt after that, feeling unclean or whatever you want to call it, right? Because then suddenly the Neptune kind of kicks in and makes you think about, well, what about your spiritual body? What about your spiritual self? What about your spirit, your soul? Are you attending to those components of who you are, or is it all just about the physical sort of pleasures and senses? So, there's all these different dynamics that can come up through the understanding or experience or perception of spirit and matter, and the inherent sort of conflict between the two. That's very complex, though, that whole area, and that would go into many different layers into a particular individual if we were exploring that theme, for instance. Okay, so leaving it there for today. Hopefully this video, or audio rather, is useful for you, and that you're able to just check out your own chart and explore things in the ways that I've suggested, and just consider how this is showing up for you. And I should have done this earlier in the year. I do apologize. I've just, one reason or another, I've been caught up in something else. But nevertheless, we're only halfway through the year. So you can now actually backtrack when this actually started, which was in March. And you can just have a think about what, did anything significant sort of take off or come into your consciousness about these two areas of your life where you felt a stronger sort of sense of ease or ability to actually work with the two together. Okay, I'll see you guys very soon with something else. Much love and blessings to all of you. Thank you so much for connecting and integrating and subscribing, and integrating in the community section as well by leaving your comments and appreciations. I really am very, very grateful to all of you, and always sending you guys much love and blessings, and looking forward to the next time I connect with you guys. Okay, bye for now. Thanks.